Veteran Salute is sponsored by the Devon James Injury Lawyers.
A Newton native says Vietnam was a big adjustment from Kansas. He says he was always a hunter, and he thinks that prepared him well.
Gwen Bevel and photojournalist Nick Kiefer have his story.
Ed Roberts says he had just graduated college and had a great job when he got the draft notice. He went down and enlisted, and he says it was really tough to pack up and leave everything he knew to head to a place where there were so many unknowns.
This bag right here is the bag that I carried in Vietnam.
Ed Roberts was trained as an artillery officer, but he says the Army determined the greater need was in the infantry.
This is my little black book.
In it, the prayer they often said.
And most merciful Father, we kindly beseech thee.
On another page, direct orders from the company commander, no peace signs on their helmets. They were at war and packing lots of ammo.
2 frags, 2 smoke grenades.
He says his job was to get some very young men home alive.
I was 24, I was the old man.
There were 9 men in his platoon, and with this compass strapped to his wrist, he led them.
We just navigated through the jungle, one step at a time.
He says their missions were search and destroy.
Where intelligence thought the enemy was.
Robert says helicopters would pick them up from base camp and drop them in the bush for days.
We never walked on the same path twice.
He says they were on such high alert they would only take one boot off at a time.
And you'd do the other one. Get some air to your feet so you didn't get foot rot.
Robert says the only bath they took the entire time was in a bomb crater. He says it didn't matter because they were wet all the time. He says the jungle posed many threats, like the poisonous snake he one time came eye to eye with. He says he grabbed his medic's gun, but it wasn't loaded.
So he put a round in it and gave it back to me. I opened it up again, no snake. I said, the snake's gone. I don't know where he's at. Both of us are out of that foxhole. We slept outside here in the rain all night.
He says they didn't sleep much with men on guard and 2-hour shifts. Before they knew, it was time to get up.
Usually had a beer for breakfast if you had a beer, because they would give you 3 beers every 5 days.
He says he remembers well what it was like to hear the choppers coming to drop supplies and water, something he says they could never get enough of. That was except for the times it stood in their way.
I said, okay, I need somebody to swim across there with a rope and tie it to a tree, you know, so we could get across. And they all looked at me and said, I don't swim.
Robert says he swam across and tied the rope that he was glad was part of his inventory here in his little black book.
No, 120-foot nylon rope. That's what got us across the river that day.
He also got the men through many other obstacles, the men he only knew by their last names.
You're close to them, but you didn't want to be too close.
He says that's how the military trains you, just in case some of them don't make it back.
Everybody was counting the days of when do I go home, you know.
In the end, Roberts completed the mission he was called to do.
These are maps, literally maps that I used when I was over there.
All of Roberts' men survived the war. So did Roberts, barely.
I wasn't wounded, but I had malaria. I had carbuncles on my legs to the degree that I couldn't walk. And then I had a tumor on my chest.
This month marks 50 years since this final mission was documented.
And this was my last mission coming back into the base camp.
Robert says doctors in Vietnam were convinced his tumor was cancer. They did exploratory surgery once he was stateside, and they had to remove part of his 2nd and 3rd ribs just to get all the tumor. Thankfully, it wasn't cancer. Here for you, Gwen Bevel, KSN News 3.
The Devon James Injury Lawyers here with our Veteran of the Week, and that's First Lieutenant Ed Roberts, who served our country in Vietnam. He was an infantry platoon leader. On behalf of all of Kansas, thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this, and I'll accept this in honor of those who didn't make it back.
Veteran Salute is sponsored by the Devon James Injury Lawyers.